So today what we're going to talk about is eggs, egg composition, and cooking. So I know we cook on a griddle over here, but we're going to be cooking on saute pans today. So we want to start talking about the eggs a little bit. So when we talk about eggs, and this is going to sound silly, we're talking about chicken eggs. Even though there's a lot of different eggs out there, there's quail eggs and duck eggs and ostrich eggs and all that, but in a commercial setting, when we say eggs, we mean chicken eggs, okay? So these are called shell eggs, as you guys know. There's two types of shell eggs. There's a fresh shell egg and there's a storage egg. A fresh shell egg is an egg that's been laid and it's up to 30 days old. Anything after 30 days, it's called a storage egg. Now, the quality is about the same. The appearance is not as good. So anytime you've cracked an egg open and it just runs out like this, that's an older egg. So when we also talk about the age of the egg, that's going to tell us the grade. So when you go to the supermarket and you see AA eggs and you're asking yourself, why are they so much more expensive than the other eggs there? Because it's a much fresher egg. It's from 0 to 7 days old. A grade A egg is from 7 to 30 days old. And then a grade B would typically be considered a storage egg. Again, the quality is good, but the appearance may not be so great once you crack the egg. So those will typically go to a breaker plant. Okay, a breaker plant is where they do something to the egg. So we use here hard-boiled eggs, we use liquid eggs, we use egg blend. Those all go to a breaker plant, okay, where a process has been done. So at these breaker plants, unlike fresh eggs, which really, it's a voluntary inspection on quality. Anything that goes to a breaker plant goes under USDA inspection. So anything that's done there, there's a USDA inspector that's on site that has to see what's going on. The company pays for it. If the inspector calls out sick that day, you don't crack any eggs. Simple as that, okay? So when we're talking about these, we say this is a large egg. This is what we use here. This is the industry standard, is a large egg. And there's reasons why that's important, especially for those of you guys that like to bake or do pastries, because the standard when you bake or make pastries is eggs are in weight, not by the each. So if your recipe's calling for 2 pounds of eggs, you need to know, well, how much is that really of this? So we know that the egg inside is 1.66 ounces. Well, how do you know that? Well, that's the standard. So there are 6 different sizes of eggs. There's a jumbo, which is 30 eggs per dozen. There's an extra large, which is 27 ounces per dozen. These are large eggs. They're 24 ounces per dozen. So that means this weighs 2 ounces. Then there's a medium, which is 21 ounces per dozen, a small, which is 18 ounces per dozen, and a peewee, which is 15 ounces per dozen. So the shell of this egg weighs 0.33 ounces. The yolk, or the fat, weighs 0.66 ounces. And then the whites, or the protein, or what's called albumin, is 1 ounce. So that's why it's important to know if your recipe calls for 2 pounds of eggs, I know I need 19 to 20 eggs. So you take out your calculator and you do some math and say, that's what I need, instead of guessing at what you're doing, okay? So we'll talk about the different parts of the egg. So if you notice, the eggs are usually, they're oval shaped, but there's one side that's a little more cone shaped than the other. That's where the air sac is, okay? And that's important to know because this is a very porous product here. There's about 7,000 pores in an egg. So when a hen lays her egg, her body temperature is about 106 degrees. So as she lays her eggs and the outside temperature cools it down, air comes in and creates a vacuum in here, and that creates the air sac. So if you put this under a light, which they call candling, at a plant or at someone's house or wherever you're farming these eggs, you'll see a little concave shape like this. The smaller the air sac, the fresher it is. That's one way to tell. Another way to tell is if you're candling it and you hold it this way, that yolk will be directly in the center. So what happens is air comes in, it creates a vacuum. That membrane, the outer membrane, sucks into everything and creates the air sac. So any of you guys that have done hard-boiled eggs at home, and you crack them, you peel them, and you get that outer membrane that always sticks, and that's the protective barrier in here, okay? So then once we get into there, you have your main parts of your whites, your protein, called albumin, and that's the liquid medium that the chicken will float around in while it's developing. The yolk or the fat, okay, is what it'll feed on. So I have an egg here that I've already cracked. If you can pass this around, you're going to see a couple of things. On the either end of the yolks, you're going to see these two little white things. They're called Colella cords. And they're a type of protein. What they do is they hold that egg right in the center. So as it gets older, they start to get a little bit weaker. And if you look on that yolk, you're going to see a little tiny white spot. That's the germinal spot. That's where the chicken's DNA is. So as it starts to develop and it grows, it'll start feeding on the yolk. It'll sit in the whites of the albumin, and it'll develop. Okay? So most chickens, anywhere from 6 to 18 months, are best laying hens. They will produce, depending on feed, how they're cared for, weather, they'll produce about 250 eggs a year. So typically anywhere from 22 to 28 hours, they lay another egg. And then once they've served their purpose, they go off to a plant, and then we eat the chicken. Okay? So when we cook these eggs, you guys that do breakfast know eggs cook differently, the whites and the yolks. So the whites are going to cook faster than the yolks. The whites are going to cook at about 144 to 149 degrees. The yolks cook at about 149 to 158 degrees. When they pasteurize eggs, like our egg blend, that's at about 144 degrees for 15 seconds. So they're not cooking the whites and they're not cooking the yolks. Okay, so once you do mix it up for an egg, it will have a higher cook temperature. Okay? So really, you know, eggs are, in baking and pastry, they're essential. Flour, eggs, and sugar are the three primary ingredients. They act as a leavener. They help bread and cakes fill up. They help bind things, say like a quiche. They help coat things, like an egg wash, like when we do our turkey Wellingtons. We brush a little egg wash on there, on a puff pastry, it's nice and golden brown. They emulsify. That means they hold things like a Caesar salad dressing or a hollandaise, where there's two things that don't normally mix, that yolk will bind them together. Okay? So they're really indispensable. Here's a question for you. You know what these pleats in my hat represent? Folklore is that a chef can make eggs as many ways as he has pleats in his toque. Okay? Mine have to have a few less pleats. I don't think I can do this many. Okay? So when we cook our eggs, I know we cook them on the griddle up front. So again, it's a little bit different. That egg spreads all the way out, and we are a little bit careful. When we're cooking them in a pan, we have to be a little more careful on our technique. So I'm going to show you guys a couple different ways. I'm going to do some fried eggs here, and I'm going to do, if you guys want to move up so you can just see what I'm doing, I'll give you guys an opportunity as well to do this. So I'm not looking for very high heat at all. I want very low heat on these. So I'm going to put my pans on here. I'm going to do some fried eggs. And these pans are just a touch small for here. So I'm just going to use a little bit of spray fat. Okay. So I have my eggs. I have 2 eggs here. I have 2 eggs here. So we offer a 4-ounce portion of eggs. This is 2 eggs, so this is going to be about 3.5 ounces. So I want to have my spatula here. I'm going to start with my omelet. If you could put that right over there for me. Okay. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of heat. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start watching it cook. So you notice it's a lot thicker than what you guys are used to on the griddle, because it just spreads all the way out. It's very quick. So in a commercial setting, what I would do is in a restaurant or a hotel, I would have my toppings, like my onions, my peppers, my spinach, I would have that all cooked off. So when I get an order, I basically drop it in the pan just to reheat it. I'm not trying to cook it because it's already cooked. And then I can go ahead with my omelet. So I use my spatula, and as you can see, I'm just moving this down. See how it comes away like that? And then what I want to do is I want to pour my egg back in there. So what I'm trying to do is get the majority of this cooked before I flip it, okay? I swirl it around. As you notice, this is taking longer than when you guys do your breakfast omelets, correct? So again, I'm just folding this back a little bit. And this is what you would do at home, okay? Okay. So I really try to make sure that that bottom is set before I flip it. So I'm moving this around, trying to get all that egg on top cooked. I want to make sure that it's all fully released. And then I start to give it a little shake to see if it starts to move. So if it's not moving, I want to cook it a little bit longer on the bottom. I really don't want to add a whole lot of color. This part here is going to be my outside. Okay? So once I do flip it, it's going to be quick flip. Okay? And give it just a little bit longer. So once I flip it, that's when I would add my cheese, put it in there, fold it over onto the plate. So now you can see it's starting to move. Take that one off. Okay? So now I'm swirling it around. I'm trying to get that motion going. What I want to do is flip it up and over. Now, if you're really good, you can do it right over your burner. I don't, because if I miss, what's going to happen? You guys are going to be cleaning it up after shift, right? Okay? So we want to get it going. We want to start moving it. Okay? Back on the heat. Just want to cook it. I would put my cheese in there. Okay? So I released it. I would take my plate. So again, here's the round part of my omelet. I want it to be over here. So I'm basically just going to start it right there. I get about halfway, and I fold it over. Here's my omelet. Okay. So we do basically the same. I'm not using this one because I left that on there a little long, so it's really hot. I don't want that. Okay, so I'm just going to let this get. Now I do want some, I don't want to put these on here cold, even with spray, because we talked about earlier in another training that even though these are Teflon coated, and even though your griddle is seasoned and it seems flat, there are little microscopic divots and pits in there. So if I put cold protein in here, once it gets hot, it's cooking in all those little crevices. So I want to make sure that this is hot enough that when the protein hits that oil gives it just a quick flash of cooking, and it won't stick to anything. Okay? You also notice here I have salt and pepper. I didn't season this up, but I keep my salt and my pepper separate, because if I'm seasoning something that's already salty or something that's already spicy, I don't really want to add the same amount. I want to be able to dictate what I'm seasoning. Okay? Okay. So just like you guys do the same thing, sunny side up, over easy, over medium, over hard. Okay. But it's the same process. So this takes a little bit longer. So as you can see in here, see those whites there versus this? And a real fresh egg, those will be real tight. That yolk will sit up nice and high. As it gets older, it starts to fall down a little bit. So as you can see, I'm moving around here pretty good. this every morning in a sauté pan. Okay, so you want to get that rhythm going so you can, so you see I took it off, I splattered a little bit there, okay? Okay, now I released it. And then those are your fried eggs. Okay? So that's about it. I mean, there's a lot to know about eggs. If you guys go to work when you get out of the service and you are working in some place that you're, using the pan method as opposed to the griddle, there's a little more technique involved. So, who wants to make some eggs? This pan is hot. Okay, so you guys want to? All right, want to use it so it doesn't sit on here like you can stop. This doesn't sit